Hello. We love going to restaurants as a family, but there's one restaurant that we went to where it was so significant to us when we were in Greece. It's beautiful, this restaurant. They serve you food where they kind of cook the food beside you. It's the classic Greek taverna with the wicker chairs and the way they clip the tablecloths to the table as you arrive. And this particular taverna is located just slightly up the hill. So you can sit and watch the sunset over the sea. And one particular year we went, and as the sun was setting, my son stood up. I think he was about 13, put his hand to the table, pushed himself up, and said, "Right, I've got something to tell you." And he came out. He told us that he was bisexual and that he really wanted support around it. We, of course, threw our arms around him and were like, "Oh!" And we talked it all through. And we had this beautiful moment as a family. I think if we'd have been in our house or at his grandmother's house, we may not have had that conversation. As we left the restaurant, he went, "I'm so glad I was able to tell you." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, I've been holding on to that for ages." And I was like, "Really? God, he hasn't been like eating at you or anything." And he went, "Well," I said, "How long have you been holding on to it?" He said, 4 weeks. I mean, how times have changed, right?
What'd you say? Heard. I got that, don't worry.
Okay.
Heard, chef, got 20 chicken all day.
I find it truly inspiring and beautiful how we often choose to play out life's most important moments in restaurants. That first, "I love you," that last, "goodbye," they're often shared at the table. I'm Ryan King, and I've been writing about the world of chefs and restaurants for most of my career. I've interviewed hundreds of chefs, and I know just how much they care. Not just about the food on the plate, but about creating these amazing special spaces that we customers enjoy every night. But these special people who dedicate their life to building the spaces where we choose to celebrate, well, they're actually struggling.
You know, this isn't the easiest industry, right?
People do not understand how little money there is in restaurants.
It was a culture of working harder than anyone else. And I was working, 6 days a week for weeks on end.
Many people don't realize the grueling work taking place behind the kitchen doors of their favorite restaurant. The hours are rough, the pay isn't great, food costs are at an all-time high, and with the constant checklist of to-dos, kitchens really aren't the place where you even get a second to talk about how you're feeling.
In the kitchen, you might have had a bad service, or you might have been going through something in your personal life and you need to talk to somebody. We don't have that outlet.
This is a podcast about kitchen culture. It's also a podcast that's going to help you by giving you access to experts from around the world. Experts to help you find new ways of working, develop helpful habits, and make small, significant changes that will make kitchen life more sustainable. This is Heard. JJ Johnson from Field Trip is one of the leaders in the industry who thinks it's time for a change. And he's got a fairly radical idea, an idea which he thinks could help him and his staff cope with the pressures of working in kitchens.
I hope that I can employ somebody that my team can go to and sit on the couch like billions, because these corporate offices have it for these guys that lose money, like trade money, and they lose a lot of money and they need to go talk to somebody so they don't feel bad. I hope to have that one day, a part of like HR, right? That person's HR, or in side by side where you can go sit on the couch. There's a comfy room. They give you maybe some Skittles, I don't know, right? Some macaroons, and you talk through whatever it is and you can walk out feeling like a better person.
I like that you went for Skittles there. JJ's couch food is Skittles. Let's talk about that idea. She's called Wendy Rhodes, the person on Billions. Describe to me in your words the role that Wendy Rhodes plays on Billions.
She's keeping people connected to the mission of the company to push through hard times. Wendy keeps you on track so you don't mentally crack.
Heard JJ. And ever since JJ spoke about this idea of having a performance coach inside his own kitchens, I've been on a mission to find someone who fits the bill.
My name is Dr. Julie Gurner. I am an executive performance coach and doctor of psychology.
I found JJ's Wendy, a doctor who helps some of the world's top executives who work under constant pressure, managing millions in budgets and trying to find an edge in everything they do. And she's going to give you insights into what makes a great leader, how to handle high-pressured work environments, and what to do if you find yourself working in a toxic one. I think you'll agree, Dr. Julie is extremely well qualified in this area.
I started out in adult psychopathology and forensics, so quite a very different background, but with very extreme personalities. I got involved in academics and was asked to advise on a few products for technology companies. And that's a pretty typical thing that happens to academics from time to time. But in the course of that, a venture firm who was funding this one company said, we have this other company that's really, the leader is struggling after a large round of funding, so they're often given millions of dollars. And for some people, that can be quite paralyzing in their decision making. And I was the only psychology doctor that this company knew. They asked if I would speak with him, did so for a few meetings. He got back on track, and it really defined for me, it's that moment where you feel just hand in glove that you've met what you were meant to do.
You have been compared to a lady called Wendy Rhodes from the TV show Billions, which, if no one's seen this, for the listeners, this is about high-frequency traders, people that are gambling with lots of money on the stock market, and they have a person in their team working full-time within the team called Wendy Rhodes, who does this type of personal development coaching. I can kind of guess what your response to this is going to be, but how do you feel about Wendy Rhodes? How do you feel about that comparison?
The Wall Street Journal made that comparison, and I think that the positive is it finally kind of explained to my mother what I do for a living. So I think that was a good thing, right? She's like, "Are you a psychologist?" I'm like, "No, I'm not a therapist. I don't do therapy. I refer people out who need therapy." But how I feel about it is that I think that it is realistic in how the relationships and way in which you sometimes work with people who have very high stress, high pressure jobs, and that your job is really to help them. And by helping them, if you are working with a trader or you're working with somebody who's responsible for millions of dollars of production, if you can help that person improve themselves and how they are feeling and operating by even 1 or 2%, you're getting millions of dollars for the company. And so you pay for yourself many, many times over. And these positions do exist. In her case, she's incredibly unethical. She ends up doing all sorts of antics that are for TV. And for that reason, it frustrates me tremendously. So stopped watching. But initially, I was very excited about the fact that at least this role had a bit of a spotlight on it. Someone talked about it and recognized that psychology can be used a number of ways that are not therapy. These aren't people who have any type of psychological disorder or any kinds of problems. And if they do, I refer them to psychologists to deal with those clinical issues. This is for people who may need these minor adjustments that are not clinical, but they're healthy people who just need a bit of a tweak to get back on track or get over something and be able to perform at their best.
So tell me a little bit more about your approach with these clients. How exactly does it work?
Sure. My work is very cognitive in its approach. So the way in which I approach most people is to really understand and then begin to have them understand the power of how they think to influence how they feel and those feelings influencing what they ultimately do. People usually say, "This thing made me feel frustrated." Usually, items or events do not make you immediately feel anything, but there's an interpretation that lends to that feeling of frustration. For example, if you are frustrated with an employee and immediately they do something that agitates you, that employee's actions are not necessarily the thing that agitates you. It's that you have an interpretation that those actions are stupid, display poor judgment, are not based in how the company normally operates, is not thinking about certain variables. And then that thought leads to the feeling of frustration, which then leads you from that feeling of frustration to lash out in ways that are probably quite inappropriate sometimes and sometimes just frustrating for you. So if you interpret those events differently, it leads to a different emotion, which leads to a different action. And so people usually don't break it down like that because as we move about the world, it's kind of like how when we eat a dinner, we aren't thinking about raise your hand to your mouth, right? And tilt the fork in a certain way. We aren't thinking about it. It's automatic for us. And the same way, the same thing happens to how we think and move about the world. We have patterns that are just automatic that we don't break down anymore because we've been in this routine for years and years and years of our lives. And so my job really is to get that kind of automatic behavior and automatic action and actually piece it apart so that we can restructure it a bit.
And how difficult is it to break those habitual responses that we have? Because like you say, we don't think about it. The trigger goes and it happens. And let's stay on this example of frustration, because I think this happens a lot in kitchens and you do have that mentorship role happening. And I hear a lot of chefs that are very experienced complain massively about the young culinary graduate because they don't have the skills that they expect them to have after they've left university. How can you break that? Is it something we can all do?
It isn't easy. And I think that that's really interesting. As soon as you say there's an expectation they should have a certain skill, immediately I think, okay, well, there's the frustration point, right? The expectation that you're not seeing, that's the thought, right? They should know this. They should have this. And then you don't see it. And then you become angry, frustrated, impatient, etc. And then those emotions of anger, frustration, impatience fuel a behavior that probably isn't your finest. And so how you think about them coming out of culinary school and perhaps being, this person is green, they have no experience, they're eager and excited, but they don't know much yet. How you interpret that will lead then to your behavior toward that kind of person. But how hard is it to break? To get back to your question, it is a practice of challenging, being open. First of all, you need people who are open to being different, thinking different. And if you have that, then we do a number of exercises where they will be hitting these types of thoughts square on over and over and over and over again, because that's what it takes. Can I be thinking, is there another way to think about this situation? And there always is, if you're willing to say, well, this is my reaction. I feel it in my body, right? You feel that tightness, that tenseness, that hotness. And if you can give yourself a moment when you have that sensation to say, wait, before I respond, is there another way I could be thinking about this quickly? You know, they're new, they're green, they are inexperienced, and maybe you're still angry about it, but you can notch down that anger probably by, 30%, 40%. And that's significant to someone on the receiving end.
100%.
Chef?
Heard.
The world of chefs is very high pressure. I know you've had a little look at this world and I've told you a little bit about it. It's very competitive, super high pressure, constant judgment as well. Everyone's a reviewer now. Everyone's a critic. Everyone's got a voice on social media and all these apps to review places. How does that parallel with the world of the clients you're working with?
So in the world of venture capital built companies, oftentimes you're given a large amount of money. Let's just say initially maybe just $1.5 million. And the investors expect that you will meet certain metrics by a certain time. If you don't have it, you probably will not get further funding. Your company will die. If you do have it, you can raise money, and usually you're given another maybe $5 to $10 million to continue forward to develop a product. But again, that will require you hit certain revenue markers, certain traction. If you don't hit that, again, your company may again die. So you kind of are always on the clock. You're always trying to manage how much money is left in the bank. We call that runway. You're always trying to manage the product being out in the market, getting traction, having good product market fit. Then you have competitors in that space, right? And finding a way to have a unique market presence, to be able to get a certain amount of revenue, to not die as a company, and to continue to move forward. Those founders put tremendous pressure on the people who work with them and for them because they have a large vested interest in this company moving ahead. They have a significant ownership stake in it. They have a large reputational piece that is combined with that. These are individuals who are incredibly competitive, oftentimes with large corporations. And there's a lot of sabotage. There are people who are trying to do different things online that bring this product down. You have lawsuits that happen. People will challenge you around intellectual property. How do you get the best technical talent? And then what can you actually pay them? So there are a lot of different people, a lot of different stress points, but a high stress, high pressure, always on mentality. People are working around the clock. They rarely take breaks. Other teams are expected to rarely take breaks. And it's a very strong, competitive, really ruthless environment that sometimes people don't see under the hood, much like kitchens.
You could be describing the restaurant business, maybe any type of business, but yeah, especially that competition side of things. So these clients that come to you, what are those common issues that come up? What type of things are you helping them with?
I think that the people at the top are always looking for that additional edge because most of them know deep down that they can be better, greater, more effective than what they are. And they just don't know how to get there. They've maxed out their capacity to be able to be as effective as they can be, and they just don't see any other avenues to be so. So much like you bring in an engineer to solve a coding problem, might bring in someone like me to say, hey, I know that I have more in the tank, but I just don't know how to unlock it. I feel stuck at this level. And so I'm the person who may come in and be the person who helps to get them to that next level. You have a different set of eyes. I think also you have someone who tells you the truth. Often when you're in a position of authority, a lot of people around you are vested in making sure that you are happy and not too critical. And so it does help to have someone who is direct and straightforward. And these are people who want to hear that and want to be better and can take it. They don't have a challenge with that. So I think that those are one group of people. I think other groups of people have acute issues or challenges. For example, you have people around burnout and stress, and they've been doing this work for 7 years, working 7 days a week, trying to get to a certain point, and they are at their wits' end, right? So you have those individuals too. And a lot of that is around systems and efficiencies and making sure that they're able to delegate properly. And there's a lot of other issues that we could get into there, but also areas around control. Letting go of control is usually around trust, right? Can you trust the people around you to execute at the level that you expect? And if you can't, usually the tendency is to become very controlling because you want things to be a certain way. You are a highly driven, almost, I don't want to say perfectionistic, but you are very perfectionistic about what you do. And so the tendency when people feel out of control or can't trust people is to just do it themselves. And that's certainly not the most functional way to do it. It's the way that's going to burn you out and make you very much hate your life. And then certainly there are others that just have goals that for some reason they have not been able to meet. They have expectations that are left on the table. And so it's my job to help them find a path to get to those places in ways that utilize the strengths that they have and the talents that they have. So the way in which I approach everyone is I want to see, what are you great at? What are you kind of top 1% at? Everyone is top, has something, especially at these levels. And I want to really lean into that. And I want to begin to get rid of the things that are taking up their time and distracting from the things that they're great at, because that distracts from the quality of what they do.
You mentioned a few things there that I think are very relevant to the chefing and kitchen profession. Control. Often I end up having these like one-on-ones with chefs where I'm like, you just need to take a day off. And I think it is that issue of, one, they feel like they have to be there to show their team that they're there, and so that they dedicate themselves as much as they do. So they feel guilty taking a day off. But I do think, really, if you boiled it down, it's what you said, it's control. And as you mentioned, that stems from not trusting the people you're around. How would you handle that? What are some of the steps that you would help with in trying to fix that issue of control?
So usually I address control from the side door, right? You can't just say, stop being so controlling. That's the front door. It never works.
Especially to a controlling person.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So the side door to me are all the things that foster the control or keep it in place. So I'll ask you, tell me a little bit about the people who work around you. Tell me about if you trust them or not. And if they don't, which they invariably don't, tell me a little bit about why. Sometimes they need better people around them, and that's a truth. Sometimes when they talk about some folks, they'll say, oh, well, Sheila, she's really exceptional. And she's always complaining that I don't let her really do anything that she's capable of doing. And I said, well, is she capable? Well, she probably is, but I really like when X, Y, and Z happens. And I'm like, well, why don't we try testing Sheila a bit? Let's give her a bit more and push at her edges. We'll test how it goes. And so you frame it as a test about Sheila, but really this is a test about you. And so seeing that Sheila can probably meet the moment. So once you then start edging people into that with the people that actually can do the work, they start to see that they can release it and it still will be done well. That gives them some assurance. They start to let that element go a bit. So you can see how you can navigate that in a very smart way. And that's a good example of that, which I think is a lot of fun. And also when you have a good rapport with your client, they can start to see that too. So, you can kind of jab at them a little bit about how controlling, then how doesn't it feel good to have a little bit of release and now you have a little bit of space and what are we going to do with that space and how can we use that more effectively? And they start to see that when they have a little bit of space and they can use that more effectively in the areas they're strong at, it actually makes the product and the business better. And then that's really addicting. What else then can I get rid of? What else can I start giving away a little bit because I like this? And it makes them feel better. There's a lot of internal pressure with control. So if you can release that a little bit, that can be really, really interesting and help everyone.
And Sheila feels great as well.
Exactly. She doesn't feel undermined and she doesn't feel not trusted. So the people who are worthy of trust, sometimes there's some validity there. And usually the person in charge knows internally who can handle a little bit more. And you don't want to just say, oh, give it all to Sheila, because that's both scary for the person who's controlling. And also it makes it more likely that Sheila's going to mess it up, which is not what you want to happen. So you just want to give a little bit away, test the waters a little bit. That feels really good. And then you can start edging a little bit more. And let's see what Sheila's limits really are. And maybe she can do a whole lot more than you ever thought possible. And also she's now excited because she can take on more. And she feels like she's more important and capable and all those things. And it starts to make the system function a lot better.
And then you mentioned burnout. Because often the solution to burnout is take some time off. And some people, they can't do that. So you're running a huge corporation like the ones you work with, that's impossible. You're running a restaurant, that's very difficult to do. So how would you approach something like burnout? Because I think a lot of us, whether we're working in kitchens or not, face that issue at some point in our careers.
The truth that I have found about burnout is that taking time off is never going to work because you return to the same system that burned you out. I mean, you do need some time off from time to time, but if you're running back into the same system that burned you out, you have to start looking at, are there better efficiencies? Are there better systems? Are there ways in which we can have clearer swim lanes for people that I know my clearer lanes of responsibility so that I can make better efficiencies or systems if I need to? If you have high burnout, needs to be kind of examined. And are there even just little adjustments like breaks? Sometimes I'll tell people, is there a way to, when you have lunch, because most of them will eat at their desks and just keep working, is there a way to just take, 5 minutes, go downstairs, take a walk around the block, come back up, and just have minor breaks throughout the day? And if you can do that, it helps provide a release valve of sorts to help you not feel so overwhelmed or stuck or staring all the time. So there are little things I think about. I think about relieving pressure during the times that they actually are at work. And how can we build those in, even if they're small moments? I think they're incredibly important.
Heard, Chef.
Chef Heard.
Thanks for listening to Heard, the podcast that aims to put the rest in restaurants. This episode is sponsored thanks to San Pellegrino and Accor, two brands that care passionately about the restaurant industry.
Heard, yeah, I got that, don't worry.
Changing it up from the questions a little bit now, I have these clips that I'd like to play you from some of the chefs I've spoken to in this series. First will be a chef called JJ Johnson, and I've got two clips from JJ. And here he is kind of talking about the conversations he'd like to have if he had his very own Wendy Rhodes based in his restaurant.
So let's go just Chef JJ running service. Fucking Wendy, we just did 300 last night. We had 20 steaks come back. Fucking screaming at these guys to push. The owner saying we lost all this money even though we did this and now it's on me. I don't know, am I not motivating the team enough? Am I hiring the wrong people? Is it me? Should I leave? I think that's a big conversation of folks, right? Because the chef's taking a lot of the pressure.
So JJ, you have a really challenging situation. One is that you ask if you're motivating your team enough. I would ask how you're motivating your team. When you talk about push, 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 what motivates you? You know, it's funny, we often don't do a lot of perspective taking. And when we say like, hey, the last time someone screamed at you, was that the time that you said, I'm excited? I know it's very, you don't think twice about doing that in cultures where it's normalized, but yelling at someone to push is not effective motivation. They know already that they're in a pressure cooker. Having that on top of it probably increases anxiety and pressure. And we know that, for example, when we do that, it actually, with increased anxiety comes increased mistakes, right? I mean, if you look at someone, for example, let's say someone is going to type a letter and you want them to type it quickly. And now you're standing over the assistant saying, type faster, type faster, type faster. You can't tell me that person's not going to make more mistakes. If you say, you know, whatever your name is, Ted, you need to write this letter quickly. It needs to be out in 2 minutes. Ready? Go, right? That person will have lesser mistakes than the person where you're like, type faster, type faster, type faster. You asked if you're hiring the wrong people. Restaurant industry is not my area of expertise, but I assume if the stakes are coming back at that rate, that there is some skill issue that's a challenge right now. So tell me a little bit about those people that are producing the steaks that are coming back at such a high rate and why that is happening. Is it lack of communication? Is it a challenge with skill level? There's a number of areas or pain points that can be producing poor results. So why don't we break down and look at what are the things that are actually producing that level of result? I think also when you start to talk about, are you the wrong person? I think that we have to look at like the system and the roles that you're operating in. It sounds like you're operating across a number of roles, and I'm not sure if there should be a place where you sit or that you need some help with another area of operation. And so I think that we should really examine the way in which the system is operating here and break it down some of these various levels. And then we can take a look into how we can get this cleaned up a bit.
You are so good. You motivated me. It's not even my problem. I'm going to play you another clip from JJ now. So that was JJ as a chef running the service on the evening with 300 covers. And I'd like to say that there's no way that JJ would have 20 steaks coming back in a night because he'd cook them perfectly. But this was his example. So it probably stems from somewhere. Maybe that's his ongoing nightmare when he falls asleep at night. This is JJ as an owner, I believe. This is how he proposed this one.
If you're the chef founder, like what I would say a common conversation for me right now would be like, hey, I opened this location in front of Columbia University and now there's protests, there's scaffolding, there's nobody walking through the doors. What do I do? Do I let these other restaurants keep supporting this restaurant? And as a restaurant owner or business owner, because you're like, oh, I made this decision. I picked this place based off my gut. I didn't really use facts. And I'm picking all these places because people tell me these neighborhoods are good. And then I'm opening and I'm only doing okay. But they told me this guy's doing $5 million and I'm only doing $1 million.
All right. So JJ, one of the things that I think about immediately is that you talked a little bit about how you do have other restaurants that can support this restaurant. And so you want to look at how long are these protests really going to be happening and how, I mean, you're in a fortunate situation where that can happen. But the more concerning statement was, I don't really use facts. I think that you said that at one point here with how you assess locations. And so that's the thing that I guess I would dig into is let's really look at the numbers and how you assess both the restaurant location as a founder chef, but also then let's start using facts and looking at how you can increase what the restaurant does to get more people in the door. What do people around in the neighborhood want? The protest won't last forever. That's something that is a time-limited event. The scaffolding is something people are used to seeing in New York, so I don't buy that as an excuse why people won't come in. But let's start using facts and use them in a new way to really turn things around a bit, and let's dive into that.
And what about this sort of, he has this like issue with comparing himself. They're doing 5 and I'm only doing 1.
Yeah, there's a very famous saying by Peter Thiel saying competition is for losers. And I think about that very strongly because if you are going to be someone who stands out, by comparison, If you're comparing yourself to others, then you don't have a unique value proposition. And I try to think about how do you distinguish yourself so that you aren't in a comparative pool. So I try not to spend a lot of time looking at, the only way in which I would look at the others who are doing 5 million is I'd say, well, what are the things that actually that people are responding to? I do want to understand the market. If their numbers are high like that, there's something that they're doing right, that they have that good market fit. And there's something that is not happening at this location that is providing a solid market fit. So I'm interested in the other restaurants to the point where they are having solid revenue for themselves. But I'm not interested in saying, well, they're all doing great and I should do great too. That's not a reason you should be doing great. But I don't want to spend a lot of time looking at what other people are doing. I want to spend a lot of time looking at how you can best serve the people who are in that neighborhood. And JJ, I want to get you more metrics driven in how you determine your place in the market so that you can exploit what others are doing right, but also create a unique value proposition where you are not comparing yourself to anyone else in that space, because what you want to do is be unique so that others then are comparing to you, not that, you are just one of many.
All right, I want to play one more clip, which is from a lady called Elizabeth Tilton.
I had two very extreme examples of what leadership looked like. And when I was at Sucre, I had a mentor. I learned a lot. My education was really put top of mind for leadership that really tried to cultivate me to not only be great at the craft, but also a great leader. And when I went to the more fine dining restaurant, it was a very different experience, really a toxic culture, a lot of pinning people against each other. It was a culture of working harder than anyone else and proving your worth and not getting compensated. And I was very lucky in the same breath to have met exceptional cooks around me that have gone to do their own business that didn't choose to bring that culture with them. As much as you can learn from something like that, you can take it with you or leave it at the door and start afresh, right?
It's not really a specific question that she asks here, but I think it leads into that topic of effective leadership. And that's kind of where I'd like to finish with you is that checklist of effective leadership, building great teams. And also, what do we do when we find ourselves in a toxic environment? And I hear it all the time, I'm going to change it, I'm going to change it. And then 10 years later, they open a restaurant and they copy it.
Yeah, it's much like a fraternity mindset. Everyone takes their hits and then they assume that everyone beneath them, now it's time. They are the leader. Everyone else can take their hits. You have to work against a system to be different. And I think most people are not built to challenge the systems that exist. And so they fall into the systems that everyone else in some ways expects them to be a part of. Because even if you want to change it as the leader of it, you have people who you're going to hire who come with the baggage of being a part of those systems who also facilitate those systems. And so you have to be someone who actively wants to work against a system. And it's so much easier to you understand how that toxic environment works, what's expected, how people behave, what gets results. Because what gets results in toxic environments are force. There's a lot of things that you learn are your levers. And so when you want to work against it, what do you do now? You don't have the tools, right? All you know to get results are force and beratement. And so there is a real challenge in those environments. And to change a culture is far harder than to fall into old patterns. So that's why you see that this happens. We see it in businesses too, candidly.
So if I came to you, young chef, just opened a restaurant, let me be the chef for a second. I feel like my kitchen's operating in fear often in the evenings. I see my team are exhausted. They're coming in exceptionally early. They've got no time for lunch, so they quickly wolf down a sandwich and then they go into dinner service. They leave tired. Often I see them drinking together at the end of a shift. I'm not sure why they do that. Is that because they're trying to get down off the adrenaline of the night, or it's the camaraderie, or is it the only way they can fall asleep? I worry about them because I'm doing the same. My diet's terrible. I'm a chef that feeds people and I don't eat well myself. And I take that habit home. I'm always eating really fast, even when I'm in a relaxed environment with my family. Speaking of family, I don't get to see them because I'm always working. And I'm repeating all of the issues I faced in the kitchens when I was training. And I said I would change when I became a leader. And now I'm just replicating these models. I've organized my kitchen the same way. Is the way of organization only hierarchical, or should I be looking at something more cooperative, something more linear?
Yeah, so let's start here.
Sorry, I hit you hard there.
No, it's great. So what you would do then is you start to break down each element of that. Because the things that you told me, people operating in fear, people are exhausted, drinking, you're not sure why, you do it yourself. Diet is terrible, repeating issues, don't get to see family, organized, how the kitchen is organized. And then we really do piece apart each one of those. People are operating in fear, for example, I would start to ask, why are they operating in fear? What are the things they're fearful of? What are they responding to? How do you think that impacts the production? How is it impacting how they operate? How do you know that they're fearful? All of these different things. How are you contributing to it? How are others contributing to it? Who are the people that you need to speak with? And what are the shifts that you need to make and collaborate with others? And is there a mentorship type of relationship you can have with that person? Like, there's a lot of things that we can kind of talk about on that element alone. And then people are exhausted. Sounds like you're exhausted too. So let's talk a little bit about the dynamics there, what contributes to that, et cetera. So like what you end up doing is, I think that what ends up happening is toxicity and the continuance of bad patterns often exist in vagueness. When things are so big and so overwhelming that you have no idea how you could ever think to change it. And so change doesn't happen by, snapping your fingers and everything shifts. It happens by incremental adjustments. And what I would probably do is have you piece out these different things, or if you don't have the time, we would do them in our time together. And to say, let's go through each of those and let's kind of make ourselves a bit of almost like a list where we can start examining specific things. And then we just start making little incremental changes that feel like something you can execute. Because if they're not something you feel you can execute, if I said, oh, tomorrow I want you to reorganize your kitchen in a way that's not hard, like, that's going to be chaos and it's not going to happen and it's unrealistic. And like, that's not the way that things work. But you think about a volume dial, we're going to just shift it from like an 8 to a 7. How do we do that? And let's like talk about that shift. So if we get it from an 8 to a 7, do we start to see that service is smoother? Things get a little bit better. Maybe you have one less dish sent back or whatever it is. I don't know how you measure these things. But
staff retention would be a big thing, which is a problem for restaurants.
So we start looking at the impact of incremental adjustments. Usually people are willing to make them when they're their ideas. And so I would ask you, so tell me a little bit about how we could do X, or how we might, instead of doing X, we try Y. And I'll have you generate the ideas. You know your environment best. You know these people best. I don't know them. Usually by the end of my work with someone, like, I know all their executives, at least by their description. I know what their personalities are somewhat like. Sometimes I go and I interview them all. We call that a 360, where I go in, I actually talk to them all for an hour and just get to understand how the leader operates under the condition of anonymity, because none of this information should get back to that person for fear sometimes of retribution or other things. And that's how we work. I mean, if I need that kind of perspective, I will do that and dive in. So anyway, that's how I would address that, is you start to look at, well, what are the issues? And then let's look at the pieces of each and not allow this to sit in a big cloud of overwhelm and a place that feels unaddressable.
Let's prep. Let's go.
Heard, Chef.
Chef heard.
I got this.
If I asked you for a checklist of great leadership for chefs, what would you say to them? These are the things that you should be looking at doing.
I think the first thing I would do is I would ask them, the best people that they have worked with, tell me a little bit about the things you loved about working with them. I want to hear about it. Usually there are tough elements and there are also great elements. And then usually people will also say, yeah, and as much as I learned under their mentorship, there was also like, they did this really terrible thing that was very maybe abusive, and that's the thing that you would cut out. But there are good things that we want to keep. And so I want to understand, because I'm not a chef, I want to understand what being a great leader as a chef really does look like through their eyes and their experience. And if they're a fantastic chef, they probably have a number of examples of the things that really create strong, solid, healthy leadership that they have appreciated, that has stuck with them through the years. And then I would probably surface what those things represent. So for example, somebody who spent time with you or were patient about your development may be a point. Or somebody who expected a certain caliber of operation, who saw your potential and kind of nurtured that in a specific way. There's usually things at the bottom of these, like really good communication, really strong, solid communication. They understand team dynamics. I want to pull all the good stuff. And then the things that are toxic, there's usually a few notches down where you could just be demanding, but not toxic. Because I think that we have to be realistic that good leadership is also demanding. It also has a mark and an expectation. But how that is surfaced is so important as to whether or not you switch people from being pushed and feeling challenged to feeling broken. And I want people to feel that they are challenged. People love to be challenged when they are invested and engaged, but they also don't want to be broken and pushed over that limit. And so you have to understand where the nuance in where that marker is, because that's the stuff that's the difference between people who are challenged and love you for it and the people who will leave you because they won't take and tolerate that toxicity. You think they're going to see your brilliance through the toxicity, and often they will not. I mean, some people will, and maybe those are the people you want. I don't know, but that's not a healthy environment. Much like startups, if you look at the stories of phenomenal companies, you'll find people who are incredibly demanding. They expect a high level of performance. They have incredibly competitive landscapes. But if they are able to bring up and bring out the talent in everyone else around them and push them in a way that gets their best rather than pushes them into mistakes and anxiety and stress and substance use and all of these other things, you get better performance. And it doesn't mean that you are easy, that you lay off the gas, that you're tender. I mean, none of those things. You can be an absolute beast in what you do, but if you have a loyal team and a loyal army behind you, you are 10 times more powerful. And so I try to cultivate environments that get that kind of power rather than ones that are fearful, who will leave you in a heartbeat, who don't really care about you or the kitchen or the environment or performance and just want to get the heck out of there. Like, that's not the person ultimately that you want. And so you can't be that kind of leader. So understanding the nuances are really important, and working with someone who wants to get you on the field, right? It's like lightning in your veins when you have something that's like operating like a well-oiled machine. So I'm all for that, and I push people hard, but I understand and help to try to develop where those lines are.
That's speaking to the chef, that's speaking to the leader. What happens if I'm the line cook and I'm part of that organization and I see the good things in my leader, but I also see the toxic things? Do I change my environment, or is there a way for me, without that power of leadership or authority, to help push for change in the environment I'm already in?
I think that if we're realistic, if the person that you work under is receptive to some amount of feedback, how you provide that feedback is incredibly important. If you're somebody who's under a very challenging leader, some people are just going to say, "Hey, are you complaining about this? Like, get out of my way." Either you fall in line or you listen or you get out.
Well, we have the culture of yes, chef, yes, chef, yes, chef. It's never why, chef. It's never,
Right.
they'd kill you if you said why, chef.
The thing is, whether you agree or not, when you are in a high pressure environment, there's a saying in Amazon culture, you can dissent and commit, right? You have to, whether you agree or not, you have to commit. You have to do it. I think it is your job to surface things before you would think about leaving. And if you're able to say, look, I want to work with you, but this is what I need to be more effective in my job. I'm so nervous sometimes. I feel like I'm going to cut off my fingers or whatever it is, like that I'm actually shaking. I've had people say with certain CEOs, I actually go to a meeting and shake. Like, I'm literally physically shaking around them because they're so rough with me and so intimidating, and they'll humiliate me in front of other people, right? Like, that happens. So being able to kind of surface that, some people are going to be able to hear it and some aren't. And so that gives you information as to whether or not there's even any kind of play there. And, you have to ultimately take care of yourself. But I would say that if there are things to learn to make yourself better, to know your own limits. And I'm not somebody who's going to advocate for another person simply staying forever in an environment of mistreatment, because there's a two-way feedback mechanism there. One is that if you tolerate it, then it is a signal that it's great to tolerate, right? Like, that everyone should tolerate it. And if people do leave, then hopefully people are seeing like, hey, we have a rotating door at this restaurant. What is going on? And should we address it? And some people aren't going to address it, right? There's a notion of the brilliant jerk, right? The people who are great at what they do, and so they have license to be whoever they want to be. But if you're an owner, certainly you don't want that to happen. And if you are the person who's working under them, there may be some things you can learn and then move forward. But the feedback is important. So if you can even ask for a small adjustment or have that conversation, but you have to have a relationship to do that. So I don't want to be unrealistic in how that would actually play out.
I'm already worried for that little chef, that little line cook going
Right.
to the chef. You saying it, then I was like, oh my God, they're gonna get
They're going to get
chastised.
killed, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, what does that tell you? Does that tell you that change is going to happen? If you don't feel you could even do that, because the impact of that kind of abuse, I know that people don't think about that, but the impact of that is extraordinary over time. It may be unrealistic for me to kind of say that, but I do think that if you have a good relationship, you can get away with a lot more. Like if your team loves you and you're in the midst of battle together and they know that you're in it with them, you can get away with a lot of bad behavior. But if you're not somebody who has a good relationship with these folks and all you see them is as a cog in the wheel, that's going to make their tolerance a lot less for the things you bring to the table because you don't think they care about you. There's a book called Radical Candor that people misuse often, but it says really to challenge directly, you have to care deeply, right? Like if you know someone cares about you and your progress, you'll take a lot of crap because you know ultimately they're trying to do it for your best interest. But if people are just abusing you or cursing at you for no reason, they don't care about you, they don't care about your progress, they don't care about your development, they don't care about your career, then you don't care about them. And that's a very different environment too. So I think that relationships with your team are incredibly important, and it will determine some of the things that people are willing to tolerate.
Last thing. Is it practical that a restaurant could work with an individual like yourself? I mean, I think it's because you're working with such top corporations and such high earners and high net worth individuals. I imagine the cost to be very prohibitive. Is it practical that a restaurant could do this?
I think that it is practical to maybe retain someone, probably not in-house, but probably as just saying, hey, I want to schedule 4 hours a month of your time, and I will, get a scheduling link for somebody to get for people to use at my restaurant. And so I'm just going to give 4 hours of time or 8 hours of time. And it doesn't have to be with me. I think I am at the upper ends of what people tend to charge. So you can have someone who is very effective who may not be me.
I'd love to have the money to pay someone like Julie, not just to be a sympathetic ear, but someone to really kick my ass with kindness. Someone who just cuts straight through the bull and tells you how it is in a really insightful way. A sort of guide rail for my own behaviour and bad habits. Whether you've got the money to spend on something like this or not, there are some great takeaways from Dr. Julie here. She talked about letting go of some control, and I see this so much in kitchens with chefs. Let go. See whether other people can take a bit of your load off you. She talked about great communication and some of the traits that you must have to be a really good leader. You can still be strong, but you've also got to be sympathetic. But what I think is probably the most useful thing here is just taking the time to break down each and every problem. As she says, bad habits and toxic environments often exist in this cloud of vagueness. And all you really have to do is slowly ask yourself simple questions. Could there be another way of thinking about a situation? Why do I react the way I do? And how does my reaction impact the others around me? It's a great, really simple place to start. And maybe, just maybe, one day you too could have a chance to sit on the couch, enjoy a bowl of JJ's macarons and Skittles, and speak to someone who can help you see a clear path through. Remember, if you need any mental health support or you just want to sit down and have a chat with somebody about any of the issues we discuss in this series, please visit southernsmoke.org, a great 501c3 that runs free mental health programs for people who work in the US restaurant industry. Heard was hosted and produced by me, Ryan King, and produced by Helen Brown. This episode is sponsored by San Pellegrino and Accor, two brands that care passionately about the restaurant industry. Next time on Heard, has the issue of health insurance for hospitality finally been solved?
We knew that there had to be a way. And maybe it's ignorance, or grit. We just pushed and pushed and pushed. I talked to every carrier, I talked to every insurance company, brokers, to try to figure out how can we tap into this market, because there has to be a way through.
Herd will be back in 2 weeks' time talking to more experts who can help the culinary community with inspiring, informative ideas. Mindful mentorship, motivation, and just different perspectives on kitchen culture. A culture that together I know we can fix. Please rate, review, and follow to spread the word about Herd.